Come on up, man. Another near and dear gentleman of the Vox family here. In a little bit of a different capacity, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, for those who don't know, David has been really helping mentor me through this whole process behind the scenes, so I've been truly thankful for that. A great testament to kind of a different way of Safe to Belong. You know, what could have been something a little bit more hostile of sorts. I don't know, that's the first word that came to mind, probably not the best one. Dave, you've been amazing, man. I truly appreciate the fact that you still consider yourself part of the Vox family, which you obviously are. It's just been amazing. So,
Appreciate it.
real quick, why don't you tell us what you've been up to, man?
Well, first I got to say good morning. That's on my list that I have to check off. Buenos dias, I managed to. I've been up to a lot of things. I feel like I'm busier now than I was before. So I left Vox in June as a professional Christian and entered more into the nonprofit world still. I'm starting a nonprofit with a friend of mine. And what we're trying to do is help other nonprofits market, because we feel like the CEOs and presidents of nonprofits seem to be doing all the work and forget that they have a story to tell so that they can raise money in order for their nonprofit to be successful. So kind of moving into that part-time, it's called Road Creators Foundation, and that's the goal, is to help other nonprofits fundraise, but also help them in their leadership development, in their fundraising development, so that they can be successful. So their story can be told. That's kind of the basis of it. But I'm also in culinary school. When I was at Vox, I was taking a class here and there, and now I'm fully engaged in culinary school. I go to Long Beach City College, back to the junior college. It's the best place to be. Literally, I'm telling you, junior college is the place to go get your education first, because you save thousands of dollars. But doing that, I've been doing that now for this will be a third semester, hopefully graduating in the fall. Last semester is next semester. But learning a lot about culinary. I feel like food is part of what I've always loved and what I desire to do. You can sit down, Casey, if you want. Sorry. I'll take it from here, bro. I'll take it from here. I used to be president. Don't forget. You guys.
I'm gonna go in the back.
No better guy. He's so good. But where was I? Let me see. Where was I? Oh, okay. Culinary school. So my grandmother was born in Mexico. My grandparents are Mexican. My parents were born in Mexico. And one of the beauties about me having the opportunity to be born in America was that my grandmother, she made tamales and cooked as for a living in Jalisco, and she saved her money, all the money that she had, and she paid lawyers to bring her 19 children to America. So I remember my mom telling us the story that once my mom got the opportunity to get her green card, they had to have a sponsor here in the States. So one of her mom's aunts volunteered to sponsor my mom and care for her as her green card was kind of getting processed. Little did she know at the age of 12 that she would be ironing clothes, making food, cleaning hotel rooms, because that's what her mom's aunt owned, is a hotel in Calexico. And little did she know that her mom's aunt was holding her green card for a while so that she can get more out of my mom and her two siblings. Which is a story I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. But by coincidence, they found their green cards, grabbed them, and ran away. But there's just a lineage and a history of food that is part of our family, and I feel like that lives in me. I remember my grandmother. She lived with us. You know, she died of a heart attack. She had cholesterol and diabetes. So there is a sense in me to redeem her story somehow. You know, and I feel like I want to do that through food. So I have two loves. I love nonprofits and I love food, and trying to figure out how to combine those two is going to be a challenge, but I know we could do it. So that's kind of what I've been up to. So I'm busier now than before, and my girls are growing up. Riley's going to be 13. Reese just turned 9. Amazing. But Riley has her first swim meet today, so my wife and kids can't be here, so they send their love. So she's going to be swimming at Orange Coast College. We'll be there for 5 hours, and she'll swim for 2 minutes. So it's a whole new adventure for us. But we did sit her down back in February and said, hey, you've done all the sports. What do you want to do? So swimming is what she chose. So that's kind of what she's going to specialize in now. So we're just going to put in the time. Hopefully she'll get a scholarship, and then we will be fine. But they send her love. They miss being here. What's that?
To junior college.
To junior college, yeah. My wife works for Azusa Pacific, so tuition is, I guess, part of that perk, so we'll take it. Unless they want to go somewhere else. We'll be like, okay, now you're on your own. But college is expensive. It's expensive, and we just finished paying off all our college debt, and it was a beast, so I don't recommend it. But I do recommend you go to college. Anyways, in culinary school, I think today is exciting for me because I get to come to you as a non-professional Christian. I get to speak to you from a heart of somebody who's in the everyday with other people. And many of you guys are in that. I wasn't in that for a very long time. I was in a bubble. I'm not saying it's a bad bubble, but I was in a bubble. And I didn't have a lot of relationship with people outside of the church. This has caused me to really dive in and to really see, to really know people for who they are and what they are. Being in culinary school has been exciting because it has opened my eyes to a lot. They call me Papa because I'm the oldest guy there. I'm older than the instructors, which is funny. They come to me to ask questions instead of the instructor, and I'm like, that's not my job. Go ask the chef. But just being able to sit down and have conversations with these guys and these gals, it just really has allowed me to realize how disconnected I was from reality. Just how disconnected I was from from humanity, from the human state of people. And maybe you guys have stories, you guys know what I'm talking about, but it has really caused me to have this empathy and this compassion. And I'm a very emotional guy, just to let you know. But it has really allowed me just to kind of listen and see what actually is happening outside of the bubble. And when I say bubble, I mean my Christian professional bubble. One guy in general, I was sitting with him and he was just telling me his story. For some reason, they tell me. And I'm like, all right, here I am, let me listen. But one guy in general, he was 3 years old. And he was in a car on the way to a family event. It was him, his mom, his aunt, and his aunt's daughter. And on the way, they got into an accident. He lost his mom, he lost his aunt, and he lost his cousin. He was the only one that survived at 3. The dad didn't know what to do. He kind of went off the deep end, so he jumped from home to home, family home, because the dad didn't want him to go into foster care. So he grew up without a lot. And then at the age of 18, he went to the military. He came back. He got injured. So his life, I could tell, was just spiraling out of control. Just trying to find a place to belong. Just trying to find a place to be. I could tell in his eyes, I mean, there's something else that he's doing to kind of, hold on to something to kind of suppress the feelings. He ended up dropping out because the teacher was a jerk to him, and he just was searching and went for something else. So I've lost touch with him. There's another guy. His name is Hoop. I call him Hoop. We did our intro to culinary together. He came to Long Beach because he wanted to be a chef. He moved out here because his mom had committed suicide. And his mom was a caretaker for his grandfather who died of cancer. So he's in Long Beach by himself, living with a friend, and I just got to know him, and I just texted him the other day. He's now traveling the world. He's in Japan and having the life all that I wish I could do. But just to get to know him, to hear his story, there was just a moment where I was like, man, Hoop, you've gone through a lot, and it's okay to be sad. Because I could tell he was trying to put up, a front. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to do all those things, and just know that I'm proud of you for trying to find the best thing for you. So those stories have been just the things that I've been able to see outside of what I was doing, which allows me to realize how meaningful it is for us to be in those spaces. My chef professor, he's also a believer as well, and he finds himself in similar situations where he feels like he's called to these places to bring this kind of hope. Because he's an amazing chef, an amazing instructor. I hope to be like him someday. But he just gives, and he acknowledges, and he encourages, because he knows the fact that there's a lot of hurt and a lot of people who need hope. They don't necessarily need Jesus first off. They need somebody to say, hey, I hear you. Hey, I see you. Hey, what you're dealing with is difficult. Hey, what you're dealing with is hard. Because they're human. And what I've done now is I can't read the Bible without looking at it from a human perspective, from a humanistic approach. Because if I don't, I start to look at it from a legalistic approach. And I don't think I'm called to that anymore. I'm called to be with people and hang with people to hear their humanity. So when I look at Jesus now, I look at him as somebody who is that. He's human and he relates. He understands what it means to sit. He understands what it means to know what people are going through. But he also knows and reads the room when he walks in. I'm a huge believer in emotional intelligence. I don't know if you know about that or what it is. There was a picture that I wanted to put up, but I think, Art, did you get it? No? It was Jesus just saying, with his thumbs up and a picture of the emotional intelligence book on his chest. But anyways, emotional intelligence is learning how to read the room. There's a lot of emotions that are in the room. You walk in and you read, and you're able to kind of work the room based on what you're feeling. A lot of times people walk in the room and they don't acknowledge that, and we all know people like that, and it's okay to be like that. But it's also okay to learn how other people are and how they are emotionally. And then those people who walk in the room and can immediately feel the room and can work the room and have a meeting based on how the emotion and feeling are going. But I feel like Jesus was those kind of people, that he would walk in a room and he would understand and know because he was human. So today we're going to talk about the scripture, the passage where Jesus heals the leper. But we're going to look at it through human eyes because I believe that's how I best understand it. I coined a phrase in my mind. It's not a religion. I'm not trying to start like a cult. But I've become a fan of what I call humanitarian theology. It's just something that allows me to understand what Jesus was trying to do for the individual in that moment. It kind of makes him normal, if you want to say it that way. Because I have shifted from seeing people as anything but human. So that's my journey. And that's why today I'm excited because I come to you from a place of being not professional as a Christian, but as a human. And I hope we all understand kind of that. So what I want to do is we'll do some discussion, but I wanted to pick this passage because the Gospels share it 3 times. It's in Mark, it's in Matthew, it's in Mark, and it's in Luke. And it's the story of Jesus and the paralytic and how he healed him. But we're going to read all 3, and I'll tell you why I chose Mark. So let's go ahead up on the screen.
You want to go Mark first?
No, let's go Matthew first, because we're going to read this together. So this is Matthew. If you have your Bible, open it up. If not, you can just look on the screen. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, see that you do not tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer a gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Okay, now let's go to Mark. Mark says, a man with leprosy, and I interjected this stuff so that you guys could kind of understand a little bit. The Greek word traditionally translated leprosy was used for various diseases affecting the skin. Here's what we have to understand. The priest was the one who determined whether you were clean or not. Okay? The priest kind of took on the responsibility of being both priest and doctor. So they would look at your skin and then they would say whether you were clean or not. There was a lot of steps that they had to go through in order for this to happen. So being a leper or having any kind of disease, skin disease, meant a big deal. We'll get into that in a little bit. It says this, he came to him and begged him on his knees, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus was indignant. Many manuscripts say that Jesus was filled with compassion. He reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. And then, same passage, Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning. See that you do not tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stay outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere. Okay, now we're going to read Luke, the last one. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell to his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, can you make me clean?" Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, "Do not tell anyone, but go, show yourselves to the priest, and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So this is part of the synoptic gospel. So it's the same story translated through three different views. So what stands out to you from these three? What is it that you see in these three that stands out to you? Laura? I'll pick on you because I know you.
Probably Jesus had to withdraw because of the basic not following.
Yes, and there's a reason why he withdrew, I found out. Jason?
Don't sit in the front row. Good one.
Good one. Jessica, why'd you help him out?
I think that he said not to tell anyone.
That's telling one. That's important too. Rachel in the back.
I think the similarities are interesting. The things that they got the exact same
Yep.
versus the things that they
Yep.
saw differently.
Yep. Lindsay.
Was it the first one, Mark, where it showed that Jesus had compassion?
Yep. Yep. Anybody else? Ray?
Indignant? Was that in Mark?
That was in Mark, yeah.
Jesus became indignant?
Yes, he became indignant. He was drawn to compassion. That's the one. That's the passage, or that's the translation where we see Jesus becoming and showing emotion. The other two are more accounts. They're telling you how it is. Luke was a doctor, so it's very like, this is how it is. All right? But Mark was more saying, hey, I want to tell you the story. And Mark is the one where it'll tell you quickly. It's the shortest gospel, and it'll tell you the story of Jesus quickly. It goes right into telling you all the miracles that Jesus did. Luke starts with the birth, and Mark goes right in and says, hey, this is how it goes. This is how we're doing it. And that's why I love Mark, because he's to the point. You know, I love that he was like, hey, this is how it is. But there's emotion. Okay? Kind of like all of us. We're emotional, but yet we get to the point sometimes. But that's what drew me to Mark. So if you go back to Mark, and we'll go back and read that again. Because I want you to really understand that this kind of highlights a little bit of Jesus as the person. A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you are willing, can you make me clean?" Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and touched him. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." So what I want to do right now is I want to kind of break down these passages and kind of highlight the three main people of this passage. So we have the leper, we have Jesus, and then we have the priest. All right, so I want to get to know these people a little bit more. Now, if you had leprosy in those days, it was hard. You lived a hard life. Because here's what happened. If you were a leper, you had to present yourself to the priest, and the priest had to determine whether you were clean or not. The leprosy that Jesus healed was similar to what we call today as Hansen's disease. Has anybody heard that? Kind of the scholars were trying to figure out what it was, and this is what it was the closest was. And this is what Hansen's disease is. It's an infection caused by slow-growing bacteria called, anybody can say this? Anybody in the medical field? Mycobacterial leprae. It can affect the nerves, the skin, the eyes, the lining of the nose. With early diagnosis and treatment, the disease can be cured. This is how amazing science has progressed. Is it can be cured now, where before you were seen as an With early diagnosis, the treatment, the disease can be cured. People with Hansen's disease can continue to work and lead an active life during and after treatment. And if you want to know more, you can go to the CDC. They'll tell you everything about it. I love facts, so there's one for you. If you want to learn more about it, you can see pictures. It's pretty sad. But the crazy thing is we do have a cure now, and it's amazing how it's changed. Priests no longer determine what you are medically. That's the doctor. So progress has happened. But yet sometimes we still go and believe that the priest knows everything, and we put a lot of faith in the priest. And that's great. But because the advancements has happened, we are now able to know more and understand more. In Jesus' day, the word leprosy was used for a broad range of skin conditions, to include such diseases as boils, ringworm, etc. Some of these diseases had a known cure, and were had no cure, thus greatly feared. Some were highly communicable, so lepers were required to live in isolation, and there was something that they had to do according to the Torah. So what happened was, you present yourself to the priest would say you're clean or not, but it would be a long process. You had to go to the priest, they would look at it, they would tell you, go in isolation for 7 days and come back. If in 7 days it's still there, okay, you go back for 7 days and then come back. And then that's where the priest would say, okay, you have leprosy, you are now told to live outside of the city because you were unclean, both physically and spiritually. And this is what they had to do. I put this up on the screen so that you know this is what the Torah says. If you have leprosy, you had to do. The Torah prescribes, a leper in whom the plague is shall wear torn clothes, and the hair of his head shall hang loose. He shall cover his upper lip and shall cry, unclean, unclean, all the days in which the plague is in him. He shall be unclean. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone outside the camp, shall his dwelling be. So, can you imagine somebody who is now told you're unclean, and this is the narrative that you are having to accept every single day of your life? How would you think the leper would feel? Why don't you turn to a neighbor and talk about this for like 2 minutes? What would be, and how would you feel if you were in the shoes of a leper? Go for it. All right, guys, let's bring it back. What did you guys share? Let's see. Sarah, what was something that you shared?
We were just saying how like lonely you would be feeling and how you wouldn't have like your support team at all, and that it like made me think of like the AIDS outbreak and how they were almost like the same way, how no doctors would help them because they're fearful of getting it, and how it was just like so awful because at that point like being gay is like the worst possible thing. So
Exactly. What else? Any volunteers? Great.
Just the fact that not only unclean physically, but for them to say it spiritually.
You're a sinner now.
Just to have that added is
It's like you're unclean, you're a sinner.
Yeah.
Say that to yourself every single
Yeah.
day of your life.
just
That breaks you down quite. Okay, Casey, what did you guys talk about?
We were talking about the idea behind almost being worthless,
Yep.
especially back in that day where society was so interconnected and interdependent, to be cast aside that publicly and not being able to contribute.
And if you were a leper, you would have to stay 50 feet away from everybody. And as you're entering anywhere or you're walking anywhere, you have to yell out, unclean, unclean, and people would disperse because they didn't want to be within 50 feet of you. Because if you were touched, or if you touched, you were considered unclean and you had to go to the priest yourself, and the priest had to clear you from being clean, unclean. So it was there was so many rules. It's the Levitic rule. If you go back to Leviticus 13 and 14, you will read everything word for word, what you had to do and what the priest had to do. in order to pronounce that you had leprosy, and then what you had to do in cleansing to be considered clean. It's amazing what you had to do in those days. But the idea of having to remind yourself every day of what you are because somebody told you that could really wear out on you. You know, I know many of you have had to deal with that often. I don't know you from, I know a lot of you, I don't know some of you, but I don't know if you've gone through this where you're just reminded of yourself of who you are because of what you've been taught. Rachel? No, that. And that's hard because that's what we live in this society. We're told what we are, and that's what we have to accept. But I think Jesus had a different perspective. Now, let's talk about Jesus in this case. Jesus, our Lord, moves with compassion, and it affected him to the point where he actually said, "Yes, I am willing." Scholars also emphasize that Jesus was trying to maintain a proper balance between teaching and healing. So here's what was happening. People were coming to Jesus. They were hearing what he was doing. But what Jesus really wanted to do was be careful that people weren't just coming to him because they were seeing these manifestations of healing. Like, he wanted them to hear what he was actually saying so that people would be changed by what they were hearing. But yet Jesus still had compassion, still had that desire for people to be healed because he saw what they were going through in the moment. And this is what happened. The problem is that the publicity created audiences, not congregations. That's what one of the scholars wrote, and I was like, ooh, that's good. I like that. What was happening in those days was people were starting to congregate because they wanted to see the acts. They wanted to see the spectacle. They weren't really interested in hearing. They were wanting to see, and people were coming to be healed. But Jesus was all about that, and he desired that too. But the scholar says that he was seeing a problem in the fact that the publicity started to create audiences. And that's why Jesus would go away. That's why he would retreat, because it was too much. And I think we see that today. I'm not going to get into it. But I feel like sometimes we lose the sense of community congregation because we're attracted to the product that is being sensationalized. And I think that's kind of a wake-up call for me, working in church for many years. Now that I step out of it, there is beauty in sitting with people. There's beauty in knowing people. There is beauty in understanding what we are dealing with, because I feel like healing can happen in that. Although I do agree, all of the other stuff is great, but if we lose the purpose of it, then that's when we start to get into some dangerous ground. But Jesus here is trying to be both things. He's trying to be compassionate. He's trying to love and to do what he needs to do, and he does it. He's drawn to compassion. And he says, I am willing. I'm going to put this up because this is the cool thing. I love this. This is really neat. I love this. It says, he stretched out his hand, he touched him. If Jesus can heal the man by touch, presumably he could heal the man without touching him. His touch seemed reckless because touching the leper, lepers should contaminate Jesus, both medically and spiritually. However, in this case, it was not the leper who was contagious, but Jesus is contagious. The leper does not transmit his uncleanness to Jesus, but Jesus transmits his wholeness and holiness to the leper and makes him clean, medically, spiritually, and socially. Now the plot switches. Now Jesus is drawn to compassion. He extends healing because, like I said before, if you touch someone with leprosy, you became unclean until the priest declared you clean. But now Jesus is touching, and he is sending out healing and holiness and cleansing to this individual. I can't imagine what that individual felt. After years and years of believing that he was unclean, to hear Jesus tell him, hey, you are clean. Can you imagine what that meant to that individual? Can you imagine what that and how that would change the trajectory of his life? Knowing that what he used to think of himself is now changed because he has been redeemed. I love that because it makes me realize how amazing and how powerful the person of Jesus is. And although I'll never be Jesus, and I'm not, I want to emulate that. I want to emulate the compassion. I want to emulate that in myself so that I could be that encouragement to other people. I think that's what we're called to do as well as a community. But then Jesus says something that is pretty cool. He says, hey, don't tell anybody. Why do you think he would say that? Why do you think he would say, hey, don't tell anybody, but go present yourself to the priest? Alan? Georgie? Why do you think?
Want the spectacle.
Yep. What else?
It didn't want it to be about him, it was about his father.
Yes. It's good. What else?
Maybe he didn't want to cloud up the priest's diagnosis that this person was still clean by putting himself in the middle of it.
Yep. Anybody else? It was real good.
Wasn't the right timing.
Wasn't the right timing. Jesus he's a Jew. He knows what priests do. He knows what they're supposed to do. So yeah, you're right. He didn't want to take that away because the priest is the one who is going to approve this guy becoming socially accepted. Although Jesus already accepted him as who he was and had healed him, he knew that, okay, now the priest is the one that's going to say, you're clean, you're accepted back into the community. So he knew what he had to do, but at the same time, he didn't want to cloud what he was trying to do because he knew that it would cause a spectacle. It would cause the Pharisees to come and start questioning him even more, which is eventually what happened. We know the story and how it ends. But at the same time, he understood that although he had the power to tell this person he was clean, the priest had the power to reintroduce him into society. So this man would be able to function as a human. So the priest would have to do that. And there was a ceremonial practice. It was crazy what they had to do. I mean, it's 2 chapters long. It's that much. They had to bring offerings. They had to do this. And if you weren't rich enough, there was another way that you can offer things to the priest to be cleansed. And I didn't read far into what happened to him, but there was a big responsibility on the priest to be able to do that. Jesus commanded for the cleansed leper to show himself to the priest in the man's best interest because he could not re-enter society without the priest's approval. So here we are seeing Jesus kind of in a place where like, yes, yes, you are clean, but you have to go to the priest because I can't do that. But the amazing thing about this is that we see that Jesus is doing what he can do. He's loving who he can love, but yet he understands that there is a process. And he desires the best for this individual. Now, here's the cool thing. In conclusion, this is kind of where I'm like, all right, this is cool. The story began with the leper forced to live outside the camp, Leviticus 13:46, and ends with his restoration to community life. The story begins with Jesus moving freely among villages and ends with him forced to live outside the country. The two men have traded places in some way. Jesus finds himself suffering a leper's isolation. It gives me goosebumps. Because to think what Jesus would do and what it would cause him, he's almost taking the place of this individual from that point to where on the cross he would take it in front of everybody. And I think that's the beauty of who Jesus is, where he would find himself in a place where he would take your burden and carry it so that you can live. And I think that's the beauty of this gospel. That's the beauty of what we celebrate. That's the beauty of who we are. Because I believe that our desire and my desire is that we become that in communities, amongst each other, in the areas that we work. Because there are people in those areas where we work that do need hope. Again, they don't necessarily need to hear Jesus right away. They need to hear hope from you. And that's kind of what I wanted to share today, because what I've learned is that I so easily and can easily think of myself before others. I so easily go to what I learn and what I know and what I've conditioned to believe before going to the scripture and reading. You guys, there's a lot in here that we are responsible to know. Because we can easily go by what people say and what people do and how people tell us what to say. But we have so much information that we do. We have so much social advancement and technological advancement that we could become scholarly. We could know these things. And I think it's important as we kind of go into our places of influence that we do begin to study. We do begin to know. Because the more I study this, the more I understand how Jesus' approach was and what he did so that I can not successfully, so that I can know how to interact. Because Jesus didn't say, oh, I have the answer, you're this, and he's like, no, I'm willing. I'm willing because I know and I see what you're going through. So easily we put law before humanity. So usually we tend to go with what we know versus what we should know, or we can know. And I think education is huge. I think knowledge is amazing. And I think that's what I love about Vox, is that we're searching and we're wanting to know more and more and more about who Jesus is. And I think that changes our narrative. It changes our understanding and our look of the world. And I feel like because of this, I now know that I fully want to love and serve the world and not stand in judgment of it. This has become more and more clear to me as I continue to read the Gospels, that my place is to love and serve and not stand in judgment of. Because I'm not a priest. I'm not the priest. Nor do I desire to be a priest. But I know who is, and I know that it's his job to love and to show me how to love. So my encouragement to you guys today is to just think about these things. Think about this passage. I taught it to the kids. I taught to them differently because it's a different space. But it just still tugs at my heart the same way. Because it's truth. It allows me to see people, and it allows me to see Jesus from a human perspective. And I think that's what we all should do. So, in closing, I'm not going to tell you how to apply this. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I kind of want you to sit for a few minutes. Not a few minutes, maybe 30 seconds. And just kind of sit in this. And allow God to just be the one to tell you how to reflect on this, how to adapt to this. Because I feel like we've become accustomed to expecting the pastor to tell us how to apply things to our lives. They give us 5 points as we leave. This is how you should do it. But I'm not going to do that today. I encourage you to dive deeper into this. I encourage you to read this. There's a lot of stories like this in the Gospels of God healing and God doing things like this, and how he was drawn to the compassion of people, and he reacted when he needed to. But I just want you to sit in this for a little bit and kind of just think, how does this apply to your life? Or where do you need to apply this to your life? And how does this look? So take 30 seconds. Close your eyes, and let's dwell on that. And then I'll come back in and we'll lead us in communion.